What's going on, everybody? Thank y'all so much for joining us here on Chad's Media for another episode of our Friday Night Lights Wildcat recap. Ryan, we came on here twice in a row, and we said it's always more fun the next morning, after the night of a win. This is our first time doing it the night after a loss, but we made it all the way to week 3 before the Wildcats took their first loss, sitting at 2-1. I mean, how are we feeling?
Yeah, man, it's, last night was the first road test of the year. Obviously, that's a learning experience, especially for a team that's full of guys that, A, haven't played a lot of Friday Night Lights, and
Right.
B, haven't traveled on a lot of Friday Night Lights. And so, first experience for a lot of those guys, and I thought that showed early. But I was excited about how they responded in the second half. I thought there were a lot of really good moments in that second half.
Yeah, 100%. You had mentioned last night during the pregame portion of our show, you do your humps keys to victory every single week, and your first one was start fast. And I think we knew kind of going into that game, Hallsville was also 2-0. They had been scoring 40 points a week. It was their homecoming. You knew, one, they had the ability to score a lot of points, and they very well might start out fast. Obviously, they did. They scored in, 3 plays?
3 plays,
I believe. But I do want to point out that offensively in the first half, you only went to the half, I believe, with 7 points, but the offense was getting past the 50, I believe, every single drive. They may have punted once in the first half, but there were a lot of good things, I thought, from the offense in that first half.
Yeah, no question. I think it boils down to finishing. You got to finish these drives. You put drives together against good teams. Obviously, Hallsville 3-0 now, and so you went toe-to-toe all night with a team that's now 3-0. You're putting these good drives together. You just got to punch it in. You got to figure out how to go get 7. And again, I think that you could see that it was the first road game. They came out. Defense gave up 7 points in 3 plays. That's obviously not how you want to start, but again, it's a learning experience. Getting on the bus, changing clothes in an away locker room, eating at different times. All those things go into it just as much as the home crowd. The place that you're playing at, and it was a good crowd last night. I don't think that played a big role into it. I'm telling you that other stuff, that does mean something.
Oh, I believe that for sure.
And so I think next week, going on the road to Van Alstyne, I think that there will be less of a learning curve. I think that people are going to feel a little more comfortable, a little more ready, kind of a little more pep in their step, getting off the bus and ready to roll.
Dude, so much, and of course, we're so early into this season. They've played 3 games, but so much it feels like of the season. And again, it's kind of this new era of Wildcats football, but it's been, we really harped those first 2 weeks on learning how to win. And now you're talking about, learning how to go on the road, learning how to win on the road, but also for the first time, they learned how to play from behind. And to me, we keep pointing out how many big differences there are in this year's team and teams from the past. The teams that we've seen from the last few years, I don't think bounce back the way they did last night. I thought they did a great job, especially as you've kind of already alluded to in that second half. It looked night and day different. They put themselves, we'll get into more specifics, but they were a yard away from potentially being a field goal away.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You got the stop at the end of the first half. They kicked the field goal. Hallsville's up 17. You come out of a very long halftime,
the longest halftime
which was unique in itself, and that's, actually we talked about. Corey brought up that was probably a bad thing for Hallsville, and I think that showed. But Silver Springs puts together a 6-minute drive that ends in a touchdown. Okay, there's a check box. Then they get a 3-and-out. Hallsville check box, and so that's good things. That's a good. That's just a good quality to have. If you get into those habits throughout the course of a season, those are going to turn into wins. And playing from behind, it's a different feeling. It's a different sense of urgency. It's you gotta find the line between scrambling to go and get some points and staying level. I talk about that a lot. You can't, and I didn't see a sense of panic in any form last night from Silver Springs. You have and we're going to talk about offense here in a second, but with 2 minutes left, down 2 scores, you break a 75-yard touchdown to really make this an interesting game.
Right.
Obviously, it gets called back, and that at that point, you kind of had the breath knocked out of you. Going to be tough to score after that.
Right.
But my point is, they never gave up. They fought to the end on the road against a team that's 3-0. I think last night there's a lot of positives to take from that game.
Absolutely. Kind of going back to the comment I made about, learning how to play from behind and to keep yourself in it and everything. After we harped about how important it was to learn how to win, and I think what they learned last night was almost as important or just as important as the learning how to win. Because again, we really had seen them in years past. You get down early and just never come back from it. And they learned last night, just because we're down, like we can get ourselves back into it. And I think like you said, there were a ton of positives to take away from it. If you don't mind, I kind of want to touch on just one of those. A couple of guys that we haven't gotten to see either this season or see a ton of, which would be CJ Williams, who was, a 100% go last night. And then Austin Chaney was back as well, and we saw great things from both of those guys.
Both guys contributed just as we planned. Austin Chaney, was obviously good to get him out there in limited fashion, but I think as weeks go, he's gonna feel better, feel more ready to play a full night of Friday Night Football, and that's gonna help in the secondary. I thought, again, another really great showing from the secondary. You gave up one deep ball over the middle, post route. Other than that, not a lot of passing yards.
Right.
We don't have the stats yet. I'm sure that will show. But Hallsville had a lot of success running, and what's crazy is I don't think the defense played bad at all.
No, yeah.
They weren't as disruptive as they've been in the first 2 weeks of the season, but they were putting pressure on that quarterback.
Absolutely.
The quarterback his second chance efforts were unbelievable. I thought he was, all in all, he's the best opposing player we've seen all year.
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty prevalent last night.
I don't think we had gotten through the first quarter of last night's game, and we both kind of looked at each other and agreed, we've seen some very talented kids this year, kids that have, a dozen D1 offers and everything. And I think after watching him play football for 12 minutes, we're like, no, he's the most talented kid they've gone up against this year. And I think, obviously Anna has a tremendous running back. We're going to see some other really talented kids, but that's going to be one of the most talented you see all year.
But that's good though. You've been around that. You've stopped that in, some form or fashion. But he had a good night last night, and Hallsville won because of it. I really think the defense did fine. I thought there were times where, they caused a turnover. I talked about, win the turnover battle. We ended up tying in the turnover battle, but that's just, I think going forward that the defense can be the anchor of this team.
Oh, I think so as well. You had even asked me during the broadcast last night, if I had to pick which side of the ball, that's been the quote-unquote best so far. And we both agree they've both been great, but the defense really has been great all year long. And again, you went up against a team last night who's been averaging 45 points per game, and you held them to 31 or 34, whatever the final, I believe 34 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But you held them to less than their average. And again, like you said, they did force a turnover. They were forcing punts and stuff in that second half. I thought, that was by no means a bad outing or anything. We had mentioned certain things on the offense that I'd like to get into very quickly. I love the play calling. We saw a bunch of different unique things last night. I like what we saw.
Yeah, obviously it's always a great thing to have CJ Williams back.
Always.
We've been missing him for the first 2 games of the season. CJ Williams, obviously he had a big role last night. It was very, very noticeable that they wanted to get him involved. Finally, feel that he's in a spot where he can contribute at a healthy level. Had some good dosages of Malachi. Last night I didn't think that it was spread around as much as we normally get. At least it felt that way.
No, yeah, I agree with that.
You didn't have, I don't know, usually it seems like 4 or 5 guys catch balls.
Right.
That's at least how it felt in the first 2 weeks. But I really think that the offense is fine. I think that being on the road, it was just a challenge. I think there was, Hallsville had some really, really big stops. You talked about being 1 yard away, Brady Driver up the middle. really wherever they spot the ball could have changed the
Right.
game. And I'm not saying he got it or he didn't get it, but it was close play. And it was just a really big stop that Hallsville had. We only had one pre-snap penalty. Now the penalty that called the touchdown back, that can't happen. You never want that. But we did better last night at limiting, controllable mistakes.
Yeah, because even in weeks 1 and I feel like really week 2 stands out to me. Obviously, you win those games, but there were a ton of those types of things, and you could tell there was a clear, like that has been addressed, and there was a huge adjustment.
Yeah, and another thing is we talked about Brady Driver taking care of the ball, so well in the first 3 weeks, and he threw an interception last night, but it was a desperation throw, last play of the game.
Final play of the game.
Really doesn't count. But I mean, those are all good things. Those are wins in district. Not turning the ball over, limiting, personal mistakes. Those things are going to translate to wins.
I agree. Before we move on to future weeks and everything, just one more thing that I wanted to touch on, and then whatever else you would like to get to. But we had kind of made the comment at halftime that you didn't necessarily have to win last night's game for us to still feel good at the end of it, and I think everything we saw from the second half, again, I feel like there's a ton to feel. However you felt coming into this week, you know what I mean? There's zero reason to feel any less than that. Again, that second half really was great.
Well, last night doesn't take away from week 1's win.
Mm-hmm.
Last night doesn't take away from week 2's win. And you came up short last night, but I'm telling you, the second half was a breath of fresh air. I mean, it was, okay, we're fine. I mean, yeah, we're far back, but they never wavered. I mean, they fought until the very end. And they came up short, and that's okay. I think Hallsville was a good team. I think they're going to continue to win games. But I think that last night, you're going to see some benefits from that throughout the rest of the season. And there's things on film that they're going to take into next week and hopefully be a lot better. And there's things on film where they're going to take into next week and feel that they've already improved. And that's all you can ask for, really.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to touch on from last night's game before we move forward?
I don't think so, man.
I think we're.
I think.
We have been naming a player of the game. I think we're ready to do that.
Yeah.
I'll let you do the honors last week if you don't mind.
You got it.
I think the man who we've been waiting. We saw a little bit of him last week, but we thought we were going to see more of him this week, and that was the case. We've already talked about him, but C.J. Williams. Great game last night. We got to see him literally kind of in every role. He did have a great receiving touchdown, and then the one that got called back would have been a 75-yard.
His touchdown that didn't count was really his best play of the night,
right.
But he did have a great red zone touchdown catch.
Yes, great game from CJ, and of course, as he continues to get, I think that's only going to
continue to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm hoping and willing to bet that we could give CJ player of the game every week if we wanted to.
Absolutely. Ryan, currently 2-1, getting ready to hit the road again next Friday night, going up against Van Alstyne. I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, me too. Van Alstyne last night went up against Anna, which is a future district opponent for us. Anna, we
currently
know,
number 6 in the state.
Very good. They got a lot of firepower. They really put it on Van Alstyne. I think Van Alstyne is going to be, I don't think they've got quite an impact player as Hallsville's quarterback last night, but I think that they're going to be a good opponent. Obviously, anytime you go on a road, that's tough, but what have we been talking about, Tyler? We're going to learn from what we just did,
right,
and we're going to use it to make us better going on. And so, I'd like to think that Hallsville's loss and traveling and losing on the road is going to bring a sense of urgency when traveling this next week to Van Alstyne.
I think so as well. You and I kind of talked about this. I believe it was off air, but you talk about sometimes what you can take or what you can learn from a loss. I think that very much applies to last night because not only, do you have those things, but you also saw all the positives of not getting down, fighting your way back into that game, almost getting yourself back into that game. And again, learning how to travel, learning how to do those types of things on the road. Like you're saying, I think you can literally take all of that and apply it to next week against another great opponent, but maybe not one that has quite that type of impact player. So I 100% agree. And I think, maybe this is their chance to show themselves that they can win on the road, and then before coming back home again.
Again, I mean, if you ask a lot of people that if the Wildcats were 2-1 heading into week 4, and their only loss was on the road against a team that's now 3-0,
right,
with a legit shot to be 3-1 after next week, I think you take it. I mean, I'm excited. I think there's been tons of things to be excited about for the Silver Springs Wildcats.
Absolutely. I mean, we keep saying, how we had kind of built this as the beginning of a new era, but every single time you and I sit down and talk with each other, whether we're on air or not, I mean, we just keep reiterating how true that actually is. It just looks, feels, seems completely different, and it is. I mean, Coach Faircloth and his staff, this group of guys, I mean, they've done such a good job.
Sophomores, juniors,
right? Exactly. It's not you have some great seniors,
lost a game.
Right.
JV hasn't lost a game. I mean, just all So last night was actually the first program loss.
You made what, 6 games or?
So you're 5-1. Yeah. I don't know how many. So
maybe 8-1.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're
Either
doing
way.
well. You're doing
right.
well. I haven't lost a game yet.
Doing very well.
But yeah, all of those things are just. I mean, it's just gravy. It's all great things pointing in the right direction. Maybe it's not this year, maybe it's not next year, but man, there's really good things coming for this Silver Springs program. And I truly believe at this point it's sooner rather than later.
Oh, absolutely. I think so too, and I think that's what's great about this year being unique with having 5 non-district games. You're going to...
We get 5 opportunities to really see what we're made of. Because, again, I always talk about you go out and try to win every single time you step on the football field. I'm a firm believer in that. But when you get down to it, the playoffs are based off of the last 5 games of the season. These first 5 do not matter for the UIL state playoffs.
Right.
Those last 5 games are going to determine, what this team can and will or won't do. It's going to determine, do they make the playoffs? Do they not make the playoffs? Do they have an opportunity to go farther? Last 5 games of the season is what you want to be ready for. And I think right now we're on the ups.
Absolutely. Ryan, anything else you want to get to before we get out of here?
No, man. Just, for those of you that tuned in last night, thank you. It was a different setup for us. It was our first road test.
It was our first time.
I thought the whole crew handled it well. Hopefully the game is still up, but we kind of talked about, maybe that might happen or might not happen. But for those of you that watched live, we really appreciate it. We had fun again. We will be live again in Van Alstyne, Chad's Mina, YouTube, Front Porch News, wherever you find us. You tune in.
Next week at Van Alstyne, same time, same place. We can't wait to see y'all then.